Hello, everyone, and welcome to the most news-driven podcast in the world, House of Games. Today, I'm joined by my not-so-new host, Otto! And sadly, his all-news co-host, me, Rune. Before I'm running out of things to say in this introduction, let us just open that door to this week's episode of House of Games. So, welcome to this week's episode of House of Games. Otto is in the bathroom, so I'm taking the host introduction session now. Now, it was my turn to come up with some topics. My turn to come up with some topics, and I had a couple of... it's only two minor topics, but let's see if we can drag this out for an hour. Hopefully we have a lot of developers listening, so I will be very interested to know what people think about these things. Because these are two topics that I think about quite a lot from a very dyslexic point of view. And the topics I have today is naming a game company and naming your game. And the reason why I say from a very dyslexic point of view is because I am super dyslexic and can't spell or write shit. So I find myself quite often searching for games and stuff, and I just can't find them because I only sort of consume podcasts when it comes to gaming news and stuff like that. And then I hear a game, oh, that sounds really interesting. And then I try to figure out, like, how do you spell it? And it's impossible to find them, for example, on the PlayStation Store because it's very spell sensitive. So then I would have to go on Google and try to figure out what it is. And then I can't find it or whatever. And then I sort of give up. I have a couple of examples of games I couldn't find for ages. And then when I eventually did find them, I, of course, downloaded them and played them and had a really good time. But that's today's topics. Otto, do you want to... What's your whole opinion about game companies? Like the name of the game company. Does it have to mean anything? Or what should you think about when you name your company? Should it be a funny name or a cool name or something that sticks out from the crowd of all these studios? What do you think?
Well, I think, as it usually is with, like, names are marketing, essentially. Like, the only reason that you would name something is that so that people remember it sticks out in your mind. And I think something that is important for it is just, it has to be memorable. And I think game studios are quite good at it, usually, to be able to, like, call it whatever games or studios or something and make it clear like this is a game studio. Well, I work in like regular IT, so I think the case is a lot worse there, where like people name their tech companies all kinds of stuff where it's like you have no clue like what they do, and then when you ask them, they like come up with like this like fluff bullshit explanation, like, oh, we change society, and you know the thing that they do is website hosting. Yeah, so I think something that is as long as you make it clear that A, you're working with the games and you want to release games, and B, it has to be memorable or funny or something like that, I think.
Interesting. I think when it comes to naming game studios, there are a couple of ones that what made me think about this the first time around, I think even RunicCodes can be difficult, especially when I remember when I called the tax agency people in Sweden to check something with the taxes. I gave my organization number and she said, RunicCodes? No, RunicCodes. But it's also put together to one word. To me, RunicCodes was the meaning. I wanted something Nordic. Most of them were taken. Like all of whatever you can imagine was already taken. And then I was thinking Runic Games maybe. But then I came to RunicCodes, and to me that was the meaning was that you have rune stones from the olden days. And those are sort of scripts written in stone that we can read to this day. And that was sort of the inspiration that RunicCodes would be. Well, codes is what we do in the modern world to store data for the future, even though it probably doesn't age as well as a runestone or old scripts from books and stuff like that, because, one solar super ray can wipe out all the codes we have ever written in the worst case scenario, I suppose. But my point is that I felt like that was a modern version of storing data with codes, and then the runics are obviously from the runestones. So that was the meaning of the name RunicCodes. But what made me think about this topic in particular was an old episode of Could Have Been Beyond on IGN long time ago, where they mentioned, or maybe this wasn't kind of funny, maybe. They mentioned a French studio, and the name of the studio or the game was a French pun. And they sort of hyped this game, said it was really good, yada, yada, yada. And then I believe they were interviewing the creator of the studio, and she explained that it's a French pun, basically. And I thought, as a non-French speaker, like, wow, this is the worst way of naming your game/company. Like, how am I supposed to find that shit? It sounds amazing, but how am I supposed to find it? It's like in French, like, so my whole, I couldn't find a game, and obviously to this day I don't know what game/studio it is, because it was impossible. It was like, imagine some Chinese person say something in Chinese. Well, I have this studio called Yinghua, and then like, how am I supposed to know how to spell that or anything? Like, it's impossible. So then you would have to sort of do a lot of research to figure out what the studio name is. So now, well, a Chinese game, and the guy who was interviewed by this podcast said something that I didn't understand, but the game is about this. And then you have to sort of try to figure out. Now, it sounds very pro-English, my argument here. But in the grand scheme of things, I would say that English is the sort of a global language that, in quotes, most people know. So, but even when it comes to English games, I found myself confused with certain studios, what the name of the studio. Obsidian is one of them, and there's another one. The guys, is it Obsidian who made, let's see, Morrowind? The Morrowind studio, I never remember.
Bethesda.
There we go. Bethesda. My entire life I would go like Bethesda. I don't even know how I'll pronounce it, but it was always something like Bethesda. I would just sort of wing it every time I tried to talk about that.
I love that like the studio that you're struggling with is like either like a French pun, I get that, but then like the most famous game company in the world almost.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I have no idea what it means, and I think it's difficult to read/pronounce.
Like,
but
it's the name of a city or something like that where the company started in the US.
We'll see.
So I think you can go to Bethesda, wherever that is, in like Washington State or something.
Yeah, but a lot of American cities are weird spellings versus pronunciations. I lived in Louisville, but I learned the hard way while I was living there. It's called Louisville. Well, it's spelled fucking Louisville, so why? Yeah. And I remember when I traveled in...
That's French again for you.
Yeah, but also New Zealand, Auckland in New Zealand. Before my girlfriend at the time, we moved there, told everyone, yeah, I'm moving to Auckland. Oh, Auckland in New Zealand. Yes, Auckland. And when I came there, I learned, it's called Auckland. Weird.
Yeah.
Weird. But obviously, I'm coming from a very, non-native English-speaking point of view. And then you slap a little bit of dyslexia on top of that. But my whole point is, if you want to name a studio, make it easy for anyone around the world. I think you will benefit from it. But as you said, probably you need to have maybe a funny name or a rememberable name as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think From Software is also like another great example of a great name, because it feels like it's a completely incorrect phrase, or it's like you want to say it's from Disney or something, but it's from software, which is just nonsensical. But it sticks in your mind instantaneously, I would say.
Yeah, you always say, well, so in a correct way, you would say it's from software.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I wonder what's the Resident Evil studio called?
Capcom?
Yeah, it is Capcom, isn't it? I was thinking of something else. Never mind.
But that's a lot of Japanese studios have those goofy names for the studios and for the games, like Danganronpa. There's another one that was released a couple of years ago, super long title for a game. I can't remember it on top of my head.
You know, a great thing, I think, with, as I said, with titles is that you want it to be remembered instantaneously. And a great example that I can take from, it was a book that was adapted into a movie. So the movie is called John Dies at the End. And that's also a title that you absolutely remember, like from hearing it the first time. And doing something like that, I think, would be good if you want it to be remembered.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that when I named my studio. I wanted to sound like quite cool, like a fairly cool name. And I also had in my mind that if I stop making games and sort of move over to IT in general, like I could have the same name because RunicCodes, it would work for that as well. True. But yeah, in hindsight, I should have maybe had a more fun name. Here's, by the way, the longest title for a video game ever. Shushulu Saves the World, Super Hyper Enhanced Championship Edition Alpha Diamond DX Plus Alpha FES HD Premium Enhanced Game of the Year Collection Edition. So that's the longest title.
Cool. We'll have to link that.
Yeah, but there's a lot of goofy names for a lot of games. But I do think it's a little bit of a, like I mentioned before, that French studio that made a game that I have no clue what it is to this day. I suppose it is somewhat important to remember naming your game fairly easy to remember for anyone, right? Another example I have is a game called Axiom Verge. That was another game I heard about on various podcasts for a long time, and I had no clue how you would spell that. I tried many times on my PlayStation Vita, speaking of last week's episode, my PlayStation Vita, my dear PlayStation Vita. I wanted to play it on that one, and I tried to find it through the PlayStation Store, but it's absolutely impossible to find anything there if you don't spell it exactly how it's meant to. And then I gave up like a million times to find the game, and then eventually I learned that it's spelled like AXIOM. I think I probably spell it axe every time, like an axe. Whatever. And especially when I was fairly new, I couldn't find it via Google either. And also, I don't have patience for that kind of stuff, so I would maybe give it one shot on Google, and I was like, fuck it, I can't find it, so well, whatever, I'm moving on.
So, but do you want to go into, like, how did you name your games that you, like, the ones you have released and you're about to release?
Yeah, well, I always try to think about an easy name, first of all, because I do because I think it's good a good thing to have an easy name that you can remember, and if someone hears about your game, they will remember it if they think it sounds interesting. In case of Knife Boy, I mean, it's quite well, it's not really because he's a man. I remember someone writing, "Why is it called Knife Boy? He's a man." Well, and I wrote, well, he was a boy once upon a time, so it was just a nickname that stuck with him, I suppose. I never thought about it, but yeah, so Knife Boy is just, not much more than that. It's just a man with a knife growing out of his head. So that was it. And with the Red Colony games, I didn't want to spoil, like, in the earliest stage of the development of Red Colony 1 in particular, you were not meant to know that you were on Mars, and hopefully some people had that experience, that you don't know that you're on Mars. So the whole idea was that you were supposed to think you're in a communist colony, and then I was hoping people will think they were in China. because it's a red flag and you're in China. And then early on in the game, you enter a sort of Asian-looking house, and there's a family that basically hung themselves. It's a Japanese family in the game, but, I thought hopefully someone thinks they're still in China. And then until the end of the game, that's basically when they say they are on Mars. So that was sort of the whole point, was to trick you to believe that you were in China or another communist nation on Earth. I believe that even the Russian communist colors are red-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the whole point of the red colony, that you were supposed to think you were in a communist colony somewhere on Earth, and not until later in the game you would figure out that you will learn that you were on Mars, and this takes place in the future and all that stuff. So that was the idea there. And then with the Red Colony 2, it was like, because then you're in the Blue Colony, which makes it a bit confusing. But then I thought, well, if I name the next game Blue Colony, it might be, first of all, anyone who likes Red Colony 1, they might search for Red Colony 2 and they wouldn't find it because it's called the Blue Colony, if I had named it Blue Colony. And then I thought, well, it would be neat to just call it Red Colony 2, but write the word red in blue. Thus, that's how it goes now. So it's still Red Colony 2, but the word red is written in blue, which is one of those. I remember when I was a kid, there was this. So there are different words written, like different colors written in the wrong color, if that makes sense. So it says red,
yeah, exactly.
It's written in blue and so on. And then you had to say the right color, but you totally mess with your mind. Yeah. So I thought, well, that could be quite cool. So I just named it Red Colony 2 and then written in blue. And then Red Colony 3 is written in gray or silver. And then I had this idea to make a fourth game to be written in gold. And then, as we talked about last week, I mentioned a little bit, I would love to make this collection on PlayStation. And I wanted to call it the Platinum Collection. So then you have, so red is kind of bronze-ish. And then you have the silver one is Red Colony 3. And the gold one would be the Lost Chapter that I want to make. And then Red Colony 2 is the blue color. And if you are a PlayStation fan, you know that these colors represent the trophies. The bronze trophy, the silver trophy, the gold trophy, the platinum trophy. And I wanted to call it the Platinum Collection because you would get basically 4 platinums if you finished all the games. And they're not so hard to get the trophies in these games. So this was the sort of the trophy whore days when I came out with that whole idea. But I would still like to do it one day.
Well, I gotta give it to you that it's kind of funny to call the bundle of the 3 games that you have now for the threesome bundle, which is yeah.
That was cheeky. Yeah, if I make the 4 bundle one, it will be the Platinum Collection.
The orgy bundle.
Oh, yes. Yeah, maybe. But I think the threesome collection is only on Steam because, and the one that physical release on Switch is just called the Trilogy. So
right,
I reckon you
more
can't
PC.
name it. You can't name it whatever you want. Speaking of so that's and with Sunset Moon, it's I don't really remember. I think I wanted something that sounded like Harvest Moon.
But I think yeah, exactly. You mentioned it on this podcast that it was something with like the tradition of naming the game after like what we call it, like astrological things like moon and stuff, like Stardew Valley, Harvest Moon. What else is there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I said that, but
I think that's what you said. You know, if any listener can find the episode where Rune mentioned this, I know I'm right.
Yeah, and send it in as a voicemail. But
exactly,
maybe I said something. Maybe I said something along those lines. But I'm sure I wanted it to be similar to Harvest Moon or and then Sunset Moon popped into my mind, and I thought, oh, that sounds cute, very cute. And the moon has a certain meaning in the game, so I wanted that to be a part of it too. But that would be, yeah. And I wanted the island itself is the main character, as artistic asshole that may sound. That's what I hope to do. That the island itself.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like
the
the Hogwarts castle in Harry Potter, I guess. It's sort of a character of its own.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to achieve. And then I thought, well, Suns and Moon is a perfect name for this island, and you always have the moon there in the background. And I have this obsession in moon roads. We call månväg in Swedish, I think it's called. When the moon is very low and then it has this reflection on the water. So in Swedish it translates to moon road.
Right.
So another idea I had for the name was Moon Road Island. But yeah, it's kind of sounds like long road. What is that one outside New York? Long Island? Is it just like that? Long Island?
Long Island?
It's called Long Island, really?
Which is, by the way, like the laziest name for an island I've heard, I think.
Yeah, it is called Long Island. I thought it was another word in between there. Well, anyway, I'm thinking about Rhode Island dressing.
Oh, what do we call this? Oh, it's a Long Island. Name it Long Island.
Well, Moon Road Island, I felt like, yeah, it sounds quite similar to Long Island. So, yeah, I went with Sunset Moon.
They should have called the Atlantic Big Water.
Atlantic Big Water?
Like the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, yeah, they should have named that Atlantic Big Water.
No, just Big Water.
Oh, yeah, true that.
Biggest water.
Biggest water. And what would the other one be between Japan and America? The second biggest water.
Yeah, something like that. At least for my studio, or in quote studio, the thing that we want to call our studio, at least when we do release a game, is sort of, I think, kind of a clever thing, because it has two meanings. Like, it's an acronym that means one thing in English, and then we choose it to be something else in Swedish. So, like, the name we think is gonna be SFW games, as in like safe for work games. So, and we thought that, maybe, if we do like our regular games is gonna be under that label, then maybe we'll do another label which is NSFW, like not safe for work games. If we do something more adult, I don't know, something that's violence, or I don't know. But like the funny thing is that in Swedish then, so the way that we came up with this is like my old relative, which is like, I don't remember which it is, but say like my grandma's grandpa or something, had like a furniture factory, which was called, like in Swedish, Möbelfabrikörförrättning, which is like furniture manufacturer and then my last name. And then we thought, well, we should name it like Spelfabrikörförrättning, like game manufacturer förrättning, our last name. So that would be SFW, which is safe for work. So that's also something that I think is gonna be, like, at least for Swedish speakers, it's gonna be a little bit memorable that it has two meanings. And then in English, it's gonna be funny because it's sort of a memorable phrase that you use a lot. So if you would Google for SFW games, then boom, here's us. So then the NSFW, like, would be not safe for work in English, but in Swedish you would just add the Swedish word for new in front of like game manufacturer. So then it would make sense, like that abbreviation in Swedish as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with unless someone else has taken it. Like, how does that work? What if Sunset Moon is not an official game yet, but if I Google Sunset Moon, there are a lot of things coming up that is not my game.
Not sure. I think it's just who has the best lawyers or something. I mean, to be honest, like House of Games, I think there's this like UK-based game show that's also called House of Games, but I think like the phrase House of whatever is just so common that it might be hard to like do a cease and desist letter to something like that, is what I'm guessing. But I think in the end, it's just if you have good enough lawyers, you can do almost anything.
It's insane though. It's like that.
Yeah.
That's one of those things we both should look into.
Yes, if there's a lawyer who wanna get on the show and tell us we're about to get sued, be my guest.
or help us to trademark and all that stuff. That's the part of having a game studio that's fucking boring.
Yeah, that would be something that would be so sweet with like AI. Imagine like you could just tell an AI, start a company for me, just tell me what you need. And it would say like, oh, I need your name and address and blah, blah, blah. And it costs like this much for the administrative fee and whatever. And then it sends all of the emails and like does all of the things and then, you know, does all of that for you. So you can just focus on doing instead of like administrating and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Don't you think that could cause like another .com bubble thingy when someone just registered everything? I suppose you would have to pay for it, so I guess it's a bit different. So if everything's run by AI and now you say, make a company for me in this name, make a company for me in this name, and you sit all day registering company names and it costs like $1 each, and then you spend $3,000 on this shit, and then you own 3,000 company names. And then someone would have to buy it from you if they want to have it. Or you let them, I don't know, use it until they are quite successful and then you sue them. I hate that bullshit with all the... Oh, I don't know.
Well, if it were me, I would, like, if I were a country, I would, like, have some rule that you can't just register, like, 10,000 companies. Like... you can only trademark this much per person, and then you would like have to get a lot of the more people and make it just so much more expensive to have each company name if you go above a certain, you know, especially if you don't have any employees in each company. But then I guess if that would be a reality, then somebody would just take all of the names like in the dictionary, then fine, I'll just call my company 6497 or something.
Yeah. But then if you live in that sort of country, another country would say, well, you can register as many names you want. And then they do that. And then when you start your company in your country, they sue you for using their name. I believe Moana, in Sweden, you call it something else, the Disney movie.
Right. So was that a legal thing?
Yeah, it's a French, if I remember correctly, it's a French company that is called Moana. So it's not called Moana in Europe, or at least in some European countries.
Oh, right. So that's why. I thought it was like such a stupid thing. Like it's called Moana in the US and it's called Vaiana in like Swedish. And I thought like, that's not even a translation. It still doesn't mean anything in Swedish. Why would you change the name? But then if it's a legal thing, I get it.
I didn't know about it until my sister's kids, when they met my wife, Ayana. They were like, Ayana. And then they talked about this fucking Disney movie. Like, what are you talking about? And then my sister goes, oh, Ayana. Or Wayana, whatever it was. Sounds very similar, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, you're talking about Moana? No, Ayana. And I was like, Jesus Christ, we're talking about the same movie, but we had no clue we're talking about the same movie. And then I Google it, and then it turns out that it's called Ayana or whatever in Europe. That's weird.
Well, speaking of names, there is this talk on the Game Developer Conference that advocates that you should use your own name for your studio. Like they, instead of having some clever name, like we discussed now. I think they were a couple of developers who, like, it's Peter Anderson Studios or Games or whatever, and they had a bunch of reasons why you should do that instead. But I'll link it in the description. But I think it's also, as you said with your name, that it could be used for IT as well. I think that's also a clever thing to do with a name, that if it's malleable, that you can, for example, sell it if you want to, and you can use it in whatever way you want. I think you're limited by that if you have your name as the company name.
I was going to say, every time I'm in Sweden, I am sickened of every company naming their company after their family names. Especially trucker companies. Like Anderson's Trucks, Henderson's Trucks. It's just like, I find it boring. Like, I think you should have like some other words in it. So, but I do suppose that like if you name it after yourself, it is good for PR, I guess. I mean, when you search it and stuff like that. I suppose that's one of the things they mentioned or said is a good reason, but I don't really see the point in like Rune the Storm's games. Sounds weird.
Well, I think I would only do it if you had like a very memorable name. For example, the guy who made the Alice games, he's called American McGee. So that is, I mean, I've had somebody explain to me that, yes, his first name is actually American. So it's not just he's called McGee and then they call it like because he is an American. No, his legal name is actually American, which is just so weird. But he, I guess, is really, I mean, he named his game American McGee's Alice, which works because, first of all, I think like almost everybody who doesn't know must assume that, American isn't his name. It's just an American version of Alice, which is kind of funny, I think. And then, yeah, so I think he could absolutely call his company American McGee's whatever, if you want to.
I was just Googling Rune Storm Games. There is a studio called that.
What
so
do
then
you know?
I would have to call myself Rune Storm's Games, and that's that's really hard. Then I mean, I barely know how to spell Shimotsuji, so let alone someone who doesn't speak Japanese.
What does the last name mean?
No idea. And I asked my wife, and she, I don't know. I was like, can you look it up? Nah, she don't. I don't know, but it's a rare name in Japan, and so I sort of convinced her that we should keep it. So when we got married,
it's brand-wise, I think it's smart to have two names, I guess, that works for both cultures.
Yeah, for sure. And that was another idea. If we end up living in Japan, it's good to have a Japanese name in there.
Yeah.
If we live in Sweden, it's probably good to have a Swedish name. So that was also a little bit of an idea.
Cool. And what about logos? I mean, you have some clever stuff in your logo in RunicCodes, I think. So do you want to get into that?
Yeah, I wish I had sort of planned it out, like put it in a chronological order. But there is some cool stuff happening in this one. Some years ago, I got somewhat interested in, not really interested in politics, but I started to understand that, how far back do I have to go?
Go all the way.
The point I want to come to in the end of this is that the sort of far right and far left are the same. Very insane. And there were two events that happened that really made me open my eyes to all of this. And one was when I lived in Gothenburg, Sweden. All my friends were students/communists, like proper communists. I was the only one who worked. I worked as a plumber back then. And we went to this, and I'm not dissing them for being communists. I love them to this day. We had a really good time, all of us. One of them still live, well, they all live there, but I'm still very much friend with one of them. Next time we go to Sweden, we're going down to stay there with him. Anyway, we went to this party one day, and one of these ladies, she bought a big box of wine instead of topping up her bus card. We call it Suica card in Japan. I don't know what you would call it. But anyway, yeah, so she, student, right? So she wanted to go to this party. She bought a big box of wine. We got on the bus, and she got caught by these security people that check if you paid for your trip. And then she, of course, hadn't. And then she got fined 500 kroner. She had no money. I paid it for her. And she was so upset the rest of the night. Like, this bullshit. We should have free public transport, yada, yada. In Gothenburg, it's dirt cheap public transportation down there. Like, when I lived there, it was like 320 kroner per month. And you can use the bus, the train, the boats, everything. It was
Here in
dirt
Stockholm,
cheap.
it's like almost 1,000.
Well, maybe it's like that in Gothenburg today. But, this is... almost been 20, so maybe 15 years ago, 1920, let's say 15, 14 years ago. So it's probably more expensive today. But the point is, it was cheap back then too, because Gothenburg is a very left-wing, pro-nature city, which is why it's very charming in my opinion, the whole city, very hippie and so on. So anyway, she was so upset about this, and then we went to the party, and she started getting angry at me because I had money. But I was just working. I was just fucking working. And go to America, you fucking greedy capitalist pig. And then she'd been complaining all night about all the shit she wanted for free. And I said, hold on. You want all of this shit for free, and you complain at me for working and can afford all this stuff. You sound, and you call me greedy. You sound worse. You want everything for free without working. And I'm the greedy capitalist pig for working and paying for my stuff.
And paying for her stuff.
Yeah, that too. Oh, man. Whew, the stuff I pay for those students. But, they're, friends and... Fair enough. I was young, single. I had a really good job. And anyway, it doesn't matter. So that was one of those eye-opening moments. Like, what the hell is going on here? And another one was when I went to Russia on my way back to Sweden. Maybe this is 8 years ago, let's say. 7 years ago. It was around the time some airplane was shot down in Ukraine, I believe. I'm sort of tapped out from the news world, so I can't quite remember what country, but it was a normal passenger plane got shot down. And around that time, I was in Russia to travel and meet some friends. And on the news in Russia, which was kind of weird now in hindsight, I think it was maybe some sort of what is called propaganda news channel, because I stayed in a hostel, right? And you have an English-speaking news channel in a hostel, which obviously hosts a lot of international people.
So that's Russia Today, I assume.
Yeah, maybe. Is that a English-speaking Russian channel, or?
Yeah, it's like their BBC, except it's as I hear it, it's very state-controlled.
Okay, well, it was probably that, because then it was this Russian fella, I assume, or American. He sounded American, but he said, "Well, we in Russia have evidence we did not shoot down that airplane. Meanwhile, the Americans have no evidence. They have nothing. They did it." And I was like, whoa, maybe the Americans did it. And then a week later, I'm in Sweden. And obviously, we have the Western news, if you will. And we had all this evidence there was the Russians. And I was like, fuck, this is so weird. Like, and I suppose this is before fake news became a really big thing. Now I don't believe in fucking anything. But that was a really weird moment there. How the same accident have two complete different stories. So anyway, I started sort of getting into politics a little bit, or just thinking about it, and then I sort of felt like the right and left are just as fucking crazy if you go really far right and really far left, you will end up in one spot. And that creates this circle. And then this is a really long way to explain the logo of the runic codes. But then I started to sort of tap in. There's like some other marks within the circle. And I thought, well, if you're religious, for example, I put you inside the circle. And this was just a way for me to sort of get like a political compass, if you will, how to sort of think about things and look at things. So if you're religious, I sort of imagined you being held by your God. So I put you inside the circle. But I don't think, well, you also have religious people that go fucking mental. And then I made this sort of arrow downwards within the circle. So that's like ISIS or the priest in Sweden who convinced one of his followers to kill his wife. Like those fucked up people who tell God told me this, and then they do crazy things. And then I had this straight line through the entire circle that represent AI, which means that you're not on the left, you're not on the right, you just follow facts. But the problem when you follow facts and don't care about the right or the left is that you lose your humanity, in my opinion. So that's that's also why Red Column 1, 2, 3, they touch on communism, capitalism, and AI, and all three of them are really fucked up if you take it to the extreme. So then that became the AI line straight through the runic codes. And then I sort of thought, well, the best way of living is probably that you have some right-wing opinions, some left-wing opinions, and you sort of sway back and forth on every question, on every topic. You'll go back and forth like this. So then I made this other parameter on this symbol that represents the holy grail, I sort of call it. And that one is also inside the circle. So you can also be religious and go back and forth between the right and left, whatever the topic is. Sometimes you have to have left-wing opinions, sometimes right-wing opinions, but not too far, obviously. You want to go back and forth. So this is how I sort of mention it this episode. I'm really bad at writing and reading and stuff like that. So I like to visualize things in pictures, images. And then out of nowhere, this symbol just came out just by thinking how things should be in my world. And then I showed this to my brother, and then he showed me that there's an old symbol in the Norse mythology about the Yggdrasil tree that is very, very similar to this. Because my brother thought that I got inspiration from that, whatever symbol he showed me, the tree of life. But it had nothing to do with the tree of life. I totally made this one up myself. And I just thought, wow, this is so cool that my sort of a life compass, how to think about politics, how to think about people, has this sort of ancient version of itself about the life of the tree of life. So I thought that was really cool. And then I thought, this is going to be the symbol for my company. So yeah, that's it.
Nice. Very cool. So have you gotten any feedback on the logo?
Oh, nothing.
Short answer.
I never really explained what the symbol. The symbol, I never really explained it in what it means or anything like that. It's just because I thought, to me, it just felt like it had a meaning. Because it turned out that there was this very old version of this logo in the Norse mythology. And I like to think about this often. I think about it quite often when especially being an international relationship when it comes to raising a child and all that stuff. Obviously, my wife's culture and my culture crash quite often. And then I try to think about this one. We need balance. It has to go back and forth. Otherwise, he will be raised as a Swede. And if she doesn't get any of her opinions through, he will be raised. If we only do my way, he will be raised like a Swedish kid. If we only do her way, he will be raised as a Japanese kid. So I try to push quite hard sometimes. Like, no. At this time, Japanese culture is shit. We have to go with the Swedish version. And then sometimes he's disagree, or we always have to find a way to balance it out in terms of raising a kid. That's just one of many examples of how I think about this. I think I ranted many times about it on this podcast. In Sweden, we have this. We had guests on the show when you can start a company in Sweden and you get money from the government for making art, for example. And I'm like, I'm against that. And then people say, oh, you fucking right-wing person. I'm like, no, I'm for paying taxes. I just don't want it to go to some hippie-ass art thing. If you want to make art, do it yourself, like I do. I want my tax money to go to where it needs to go. So then again, trying to balance that. Also, long and wicked way of explaining the logo of the company.
Cool. Yeah. So, did you start the company like before making Knife Boy, or was it like during?
No, it was probably Knife Boy was done. I can't even remember if I think I even released. I don't really remember. Around the time Knife Boy was released on Steam, if I remember correctly. So 2019, 2020. But the company was registered like 2020 when we came back to Sweden.
Right.
Or 2021, beginning of 2021.
Cool. It feels like you've lived all over the world. So, where are the places you have lived, by the way?
Louisville, Kentucky, New Zealand, both in Auckland and Wellington, Australia, in Sydney, Brisbane, and Darwin. Lived in Vietnam for a short period of time, Brussels, London, Tokyo.
Damn. Gothenburg as well, I guess?
Yeah, almost a year. I basically just worked there as a plumber to make money so I could start to travel. This long trip, and then
cool.
Yeah, that's it.
What a globetrotter.
Yeah, I was obsessed in it. I wanted to go to all the countries in the world, but and now I'm so sick of traveling. It's like, never again. Oof.
Oh, I get it. Damn. I see you've gotten the Steam page up for Sunset Moon. Sorry, I just noticed.
Yeah. Well, it's been up for a while. I'm gonna see, because if you're gonna make a game or release it on Steam, it's a good thing to put up the Steam page as early as possible so people can wishlist it and follow you on Steam.
Yeah, cool.
It's what I learned the hard way. With Knife Boy, I think I did no promotion, nothing. It just released the game and it was an absolute disaster.
Interesting. Do you have a Discord server by the way, for RunicCodes?
Yeah, I have one for Sunset Moon.
Imagine that. I didn't even know.
Yeah, there's a guy called Leo I talked to. He said, it looks like maybe you want to watch Twilight Zone. I think I met him here in Tokyo. We talked a little bit, and then I mentioned my game, and then he wanted to tell me about this TV show called Twilight Zone on Pluto TV. Yeah, I was starting the presentation of Sunset Moon, and then so it's one person in this Discord channel. I don't use it, but yeah.
Cool. Invite me.
Do I have to invite people, or can people get in by themselves?
Well, I think the link on the Steam page is expired, so you have to fix that, first of all. After you add the link that works, then we could add it. And also, you have to, when you create the link, you make sure you can choose for how long the link is valid. So the default is 7 days. So you have to make it like unlimited.
How do I do that? Where is the link? Edit server profile? No?
We can, after this episode, I'll show you how to do it. But, so how's the marketing experience been for Sunset Moon? How's it gone so far?
I just saw I have 157 wish lists on Steam.
Cool. That's not zero.
No, I mean, I haven't really promoted at all, so I think it's pretty good. I think that's just people finding it through Steam when they are maybe looking for similar games, and then my game pops up and this looks interesting, and they put it in a wish list.
Very cool. Nice. Well, I think that this will be it for our last episode before we transition into video. What do you say? Do you have anything else, or should we start to wrap it up?
No, I really dried out as much as I could this week to on my naming topics.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good talk. So next week, as I said, we're doing video for the first time, and doing video all the way after that is the plan, at least. So yeah, look forward to that. Emphasis on look. Yeah, it's gonna be great, I think. You'll get to see what we look like if you haven't already. So that'll be cool.
Yes.
And hopefully I will survive the time it takes to edit the video. We'll see if that becomes another 10 hour per episode, or if I can make it done fairly quickly.
Well, if it's too much, we go back to audio only.
No. It's gonna be... It has to be... we have to evolve. We can't get stuck here. We are doing video.
Yes.
I'm just gonna figure out a way.
Hi.
Yeah, I think that's it. My quest to get a voicemail continues. If you wanna say something, please send us a voicemail. I'm not giving up.
Hi.
Yeah, I think that'll do it for this episode. Thank you, Rune, again for being my amazing co-host. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week on the 1 year anniversary. Crazy how time flies.
Yes.
All right. Have a good one. See ya.
Bye.